Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're here with Dr. Thomesen again for another trail trauma episode. This one's a little bit more bloody, a little bit more graphic, so viewer discretion is advised. But this one's really interesting because it's not a very big crash. It's actually a pretty tame, just over the bars kind of situation. But the injury is very, very serious. It's an arterial bleeding situation, and we're going to kind of go through it. Dr. Thomesen's going to give her perspective on why this is really serious and kind of the do's and don'ts and what to do if you ever have an accident and an injury like this on the trail.
Yeah. And this is also why after any sort of accident, even if it doesn't seem like a big deal, it's always important to get checked out by a doctor.
Yeah. So,
are you ready?
All right, let's do it.
Oh boy.
And I believe, so this happens to Cedric. He's a professional mountain bike racer during a mega avalanche race, which is where they start at the top like 14,000 feet and then bike all the way down. So riding with a bunch of buddies.
So this isn't just to dissuade people to start mountain biking, but it does show that it doesn't matter what level of a rider you are, this can really happen to anyone.
Yeah.
They're all, ooh.
So here we are, they're just kind of cruising down, and you can see he doesn't even go over the bars, he just has like a washout situation. And the handlebar stabs him in the thigh.
Very hurt. Oh.
And you can see here, he is
and
losing.
That was the first most important thing that he did this whole time. Immediately, most of us, if we're bleeding as much as he is, we're not going to think, let's stick our hand in.
Yeah, he immediately realizes he's hurt, pulls his pants down, sees how much he's bleeding, and just sticks his hand on there to try and slow the bleeding. Mm-hmm. And throughout the video, you'll see there's kind of a common trend where these guys do a really good job on maintaining bleeding here. So obviously, like Dr. Thomesen just said, this is an arterial bleed, and you can tell by how much he's bleeding.
Yeah, and two, sometimes you can't see it in this one as much. It just, oh, sorry for the view. If you look when he first falls, it just looks like a pool of blood. Sometimes to help differentiate between a vein and an arterial bleed, you can actually see kind of pulses and spurts with bleeding. But as you can see, it's just a pool of blood at that point. Again, sorry for the gore. But yeah, again, I mean, it was a small washout, and this is a very serious injury. To put it in perspective, just to give you guys a little bit of an idea, everyone knows or has heard of the femoral artery and how important it is. But where we kind of get into a bigger play, here, I'll show you a better image here. Just to begin, to break it down real easy. So your hip bones start right here, and then before hardly even really getting into your leg, you have this huge, huge artery next to a vein, next to a nerve. So right there, that's a very big dangerous zone that you don't want to have really any trauma or any sort of penetrating injury to. This vein, or artery, excuse me, to put it into perspective.
Yeah. And what we're looking at here is a cadaver, right?
Yeah, this is a cadaver leg, sorry. Is significant. Like, this is a very large artery, and even though it's under a lot of tissue, once that's like ruptured, you're losing a lot of blood. It immediately goes from the aorta into the femoral artery pretty much. The vein also is taking most of the blood back from your leg back to your main venous system. So again, this is a ton of blood pumping through this area. And then to finally put it in perspective too, we have the femoral nerve, which provides a lot of signaling down to your lower extremity. So even if you have an injury like this Cedric has, and let's say you're not bleeding, there still is concern that you could damage a nerve. This is a highly vascular, highly innervated area that you just don't want to even mess with. And if you do have any sort of injury, it's definitely a time when you want to go and seek medical attention. And then this is just to kind of bring it all the way back. Right from your aorta, which is the biggest artery in your body, goes into the femoral artery. So there's a lot of blood. Your legs take up a lot of your blood. So this is pretty major area to have injury with. And to put it in perspective, we were just kind of chatting about this beforehand. You can if you don't place pressure and stop bleeding early on, with a femoral artery injury, you can die within minutes. So it is really impressive that he lasted
I think
so
that's
long.
one thing that most people are aware of, even if they have no medical knowledge, is most people know that if you have an arterial bleed, most people know that you can die within minutes. And one of the things I love in the video here is that they're both very aware of this. The moment they realize how much he's bleeding, the one guy says, should I stick my fingers in it? The other guy says, just take your knee and put your knee on it and really apply pressure. They're both very aware that this is a big deal. Like, they are in trouble. He is on a trail in the middle of nowhere. He is bleeding a lot, and that they have to stop this bleeding. So I really love the urgency from both of the guys, that they realize how big of a deal this is. And then right there, like, that part is hilarious. Like, these guys know that they're in a dire situation, and Cedric is worried about how much a helicopter is going to cost, right? This dude could be dead in a couple of minutes, and he just has a concern about what a helicopter ride's going to cost.
I mean, but that's an important concern. I'll be honest, if I ever had a serious medical injury, I'd consider Ubering. It's very expensive. It's insane, not to editorialize, but it's a little insane how much transportation in such critical condition can be.
Yeah.
And just to kind of bring it back to the medicine, the fact that he just went ahead, didn't even put his fingers in to try to stop the bleeding, just full pressure with his knee, could have most likely probably saved his life.
Yeah, because it's hard to tell how much time passes here in the video. You're going to see that medical shows up here pretty quickly, and they start rendering aid. And even those guys are having a hard time controlling the bleeding. And we've all probably heard that, if you have an arterial bleed in your leg, that apply a tourniquet, right? High and tight. If it doesn't hurt, it's not tight enough. But the issue here is that it's where his bleed actually is on his leg.
It's too high up.
It's too high to even apply a tourniquet. In his case, it's all the way up in his groin area. So really all you can do is just apply pressure and try to slow the bleed until help arrives.
Absolutely. And then you can see this one paramedic really, he just went right in, put in a ton of pressure packing.
Takes his fist, I think you can kind of see, it looks like he packs it full of something, gauze or whatever, and then just puts his fist on it and just applying as much pressure as he can to slow the bleeding.
Which definitely, don't do that unless you have medical training. What his buddy did, which was just putting his knee on to kind of tampen off the bleeding, is the best thing to do in these sort of situations. Yeah, yikes. Sorry, guys. Even I got a little grossed out by this.
Yeah,
this is a big bleed.
You can see here in this part here just how much blood he's lost. I mean, there's a large pool of blood under him, but you can just see a river of blood like going out from under him. He's lost a lot of blood. He got really lucky in this situation, and part of it is quick action. His buddy and him immediately recognizing the situation, taking action, understanding what they need to do, slowing the blood, and then just taking action, not messing around, just really urgency in the situation, likely saved his life here.
Absolutely.
Then you can see here they're carting him off to actually get some help, go to a hospital. Now,
and then one thing we didn't really focus on too much is the entire time his buddy is talking to him, making sure he's doing okay.
Yeah.
And then Cedric is speaking and communicating with everyone the whole time. That's super important to make sure the patient stays awake and is alert. And as we can see.
Yeah, and then they helivac him out of there and he gets help. Now, when he gets to the hospital, what's the procedure from there as far as handling something like that? Because obviously there's a lot of bleeding, right? So how does a doctor just go in and fix that without the patient bleeding out?
So usually, that's a surgical thing. As an internal medicine doctor, I really would only, order mass transfusion protocol so they get immediately at least 2 units of blood. He'd probably get more than that. Just to try to stabilize him as much as possible. And then vascular surgeons would go in and try to stop the bleeding with suturing or either patching the artery, depending on how injured it was. So it's usually more of a patch from a surgical standpoint. And a lot of it ends up being you kind of plug the hole, clean up the area so that you can actually see what you're doing, and then move forward with either a patch or sutures from there.
Yeah, and what's recovery time for something like that? Obviously, it can vary injury to injury, but
Yeah.
like I have no idea. Like,
Yeah. Honestly, like it's gonna be weird because he's going to feel fine because he has
yeah,
blood back. He didn't have any bone or muscular or injuries. So it's really just that artery necessarily, if that's all that needs to heal. And so that's a lot of times it's a lot of bed rest in that case until they're fully sure that that it's no longer bleeding, and B, when you have damage to the artery like that, the wall can then be weakened and you can have to worry about aneurysms. If you injured both the artery and vein, sometimes you have to worry about that kind of touching each other, and then that can lead to a whole other complication. So even though it's almost as simple as kind of plugging the hole and sewing it, the complications afterwards are pretty significant. So he's looking at a long recovery.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap it up, I think it's a really good point as we go through this trail trauma series that we're going to cover a lot of different types of injuries, but I think that the message is really the same. A little bit of medical knowledge goes a long way. Understanding what to do, what not to do in a situation, whether that's someone who just has a concussion or something more serious where, someone has literally an arterial bleed and could die in minutes on the trail. Having a little bit of medical knowledge, understanding what to do in the situations could mean the difference between, someone dying or being even more injured than they would have been because you're moving the person when they shouldn't be moved, or you didn't take action when someone is bleeding and not being able to recognize that this is a serious situation. So that's kind of the whole point of this series is, to educate, understand, have a little bit of medical knowledge so that you can help your friends, should something ever happen. So. But appreciate you guys for watching. If you like the video, we're going to be doing more trail trauma videos, so definitely like and subscribe to the channel, and tune in for the next video. Thanks for watching.